5 little pumpkins sitting on a gate. The first one said, "It's getting late." The second one said, "There are witches in the air." The third one said, "But we don't care." The fourth one said, "Let's run and run and run." The fifth one said, "I'm ready for some fun." Ooh, went the wind. Out went the lights, and the 5 little pumpkins rolled out of sight. Does anyone else remember that poem or song from like elementary school, or am I crazy? The only part I've known for years is the "ooh went the wind" part, but in honor of it finally being October and Halloween right around the corner, I figured it's time I looked up the rest. First of all, I hope you all are doing a little bit better than myself this morning. Clearly, I'm a little bit nasally. I'm a bit stuffed up, but I think if I talk in a bit of a higher pitch, we can somewhat alleviate that. I would like to apologize in advance, and I'll do my best to edit out any and all sniffles around the corner. Anywho, while I briefly ramble this morning, here's a fun fact I learned while watching YouTube today. Apparently, if you've never seen, a giraffe's tongue is black. Pretty odd to see in the animal kingdom, and most definitely a sign of death if you're a human. And for the longest time, people didn't know why. But apparently, according to a lot of sources, it's because giraffes spend a lot of time using their tongues to get food. And they use these tongues to reach up into tall trees and plants to gather what they need. And just like humans, they're prone to sun damage and sunburns. And so the color of their tongue is an adaptation to the environment. Their tongues are out and exposed to the sun a large portion of the time. And apparently they're 18 to 21 inches in length. So that's a lot of space to get a sunburn. And essentially the darker color is the result of extra melanin. Blah, 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 blah. Acts as a natural sort of sunscreen. And it's just something that occurred naturally over the course of time. In hindsight, that makes a whole lot of sense. If I'm being honest, it's probably yet another thing I've forgotten since childhood. Okay. Eli, does anyone care? Probably not. Let's move on. My name is Eli, and this is Murder in the Morning. Following in the spooky steps of October, our story today takes place just days before Halloween, 31 years ago. This is the abduction of Shauna Melinda Howe. October 27th, 1992, in Oil City, Pennsylvania. 11-year-old Shauna was getting dressed up in her costume as a gymnast before heading over to a Halloween party with her other Girl Scout friends. The party was about a half a mile away from Shauna's house, and walking there in daylight was a non-issue. But Shauna, being only a kid, she didn't want to walk home alone in the dark after the party, and her parents would be unable to pick her up in the evening due to some conflicts. Her mother, Lucy, said she would find Shauna a ride for afterward. It shouldn't be an issue with so many girls getting picked up from that party. She heads to the party, the girls have a blast, and around 8 p.m., when the party is ending, everything takes a dark turn. Quote, Shauna's mother, Lucy, called home to check up on everyone, given that she was still at work. Everything was fine except for the fact that Shauna had not made it home yet. Turns out that Lucy, she'd forgotten to set up a ride for Shauna, and at this point, she figured that Shauna was walking home. Her stepfather, John, waited at the house for Shauna to arrive, and at around 8:30 p.m., she was still not home. At this point, John decided to get into the car and look for her. He drove to where the party was and all around the area, but still, he could not find Shauna. That Girl Scout party would be the last time that Shauna was seen alive. End quote. For 2 hours, her parents searched and waited anxiously, finally calling the authorities around 10 p.m., about an hour and a half later. An eyewitness report from earlier in the evening was all the investigators had to go on initially. Neighbor Dan Payton from a house about 2 blocks away says that he saw a tall, disheveled man stalking a young girl. He provided police with a description of the man and the getaway vehicle used. While the police followed this lead and searched for more, Shauna's mother, Lucy, started to do some digging herself. She calls Joey, another young girl who also attended the party. Quote, Lucy called Shauna's friend Joey, and she asked if she knew where Shauna would be. Joey told Lucy that Shauna was at the party, and when she realized no one was there to pick her up, they both started walking home together. Somewhere along the way, they parted ways to their own home. Shauna told Joey that she was nervous and that she did not want to walk home alone, and asked Joey to walk home with her. But instead, Joey offered that they walk to her house and then her father could drive Shauna home. Shauna refused, and the girls parted ways. End quote. That part almost hurts out loud. Just one more missed opportunity along the way that could have shifted the entire trajectory of the night. Let me reiterate, or say for the first time, I would never blame these two girls for any of the decisions that they made that night, but the what ifs linger especially long here. In the following 2 days, Shauna's family, police, volunteers, and even the FBI scoured Oil City and the surrounding areas. And on October 29th, Howe's uncle found a piece of her gymnastics outfit that she was wearing on the day of her disappearance. Specifically, this evidence was found next to an abandoned railroad track roughly 8 miles outside Oil City in a nearby township called Rockford. Investigators quickly shifted their focus on this area, and before long, the worst was confirmed. Quote, on October 30th, Shauna's body was discovered under the Rockland Township Railroad. Shauna's body was discovered under the Township Railroad Bridge in Venango County. She lay partially in the stream, wedged between a rock and a log. It was only after the autopsy of the child's body that the extent of the abuse she had sustained was brought to light. The autopsy was performed at the county medical examiner's office. Blunt force trauma to the head and the chest were named the cause of death. Fractured ribs, contusions, and hemorrhaging were soon added to the report. I am so sorry I'm struggling today. Added to the report. The chilling discovery that she'd also been sexually assaulted pointed to an even greater depth of trauma during the days following her disappearance. End quote. Simply dreadful. That story and my speaking. What that passage didn't mention, however, is this. The alleged blunt force trauma resulting in her death was not from a specific beating or assault, but rather from being thrown from the bridge into the rocky riverbed. And it was this fall that killed her. Like, why even do that to us? Another moment I'm left wondering, what if? I've said it before and I'll say it again. Here comes what I believe has to be one of the hardest parts for the families in these terrible stories. The waiting. Yes, they found their little girl, but the person or persons who did this remain at large. And for 10 excruciating years, the Howe family would have to wait for any answer. A decade without any real movement in the case. Can you imagine that? Finally, in 2002, a breakthrough came. A DNA sample taken from Shauna's gymnastic outfit found a match. Oil City resident James O'Brien, who, funnily enough, was already behind bars for an attempted kidnapping in 1995. Interesting. Quote, as painful as it was, the case was cracked open once again. The renewed investigation led authorities not only to James, but to his brother Timothy O'Brien and their accomplice, Eldred, aka Ted Walker. End quote. This Ted character, he had been questioned multiple times over the years concerning this crime due to a matching description of his car and himself from that neighbor Dan Payton, but he was never brought in on anything and he had always maintained his innocence. However, in light of the new DNA evidence, Ted Walker did not remain strong for much longer, and soon he confessed to his involvement in Shauna's abduction. Quote, Walker's first defensive move after confessing was to claim that Howe's kidnapping had been intended only as a harmless prank. The alleged goal was to snag the attention of the police department and make the authorities look bad. He explained that he and the O'Brien brothers had intended to snatch an 8-year-old boy, but later decided that kidnapping a girl would garner more interest. When Walker spotted Howe walking alone, he seized his chance. He approached her, claiming interest in buying Girl Scout cookies. Walker proceeded to press his hand over her mouth and drag her to the car where the O'Briens waited. He handed Shauna over to the brothers, who shoved her into the back seat before making their getaway. Then, Walker's next defense was to claim that he was coerced into participating in the kidnapping. He explained that he expressed a desire to back out of the scheme, but the O'Brien brothers vowed to harm his son if he didn't go along with the plan. And then they further bruised his ego by calling him chicken for having these cold feet. Long story short, Walker would change his story about how and why many times over, but no matter how you look at it, he was there and he participated. Next comes the truly gross part. The two brothers then returned with Shauna to Ted Walker's house. They proceeded to take her to an upstairs bedroom where they beat and raped the young girl. How many times? We don't know. Walker denied all involvement in this part, but he did admit to hearing the girl's screams for help and did nothing about it. Like I said, it's unclear for how long this actually went on for, but by the morning of October 30th, these three men, if you could even call them that, had gotten their nasty little fill and proceeded to throw Shauna's body over the bridge and leave her there for dead. I won't get much into the trial itself. Is kind of just frou-frou and frustrating. Mainly a lot of he said, and playing the game between the siblings and this third character. Just nonsense and lies from the perpetrators. And in the end, the jurors would deliberate for about 16, 17 hours before returning with a final verdict. And finally, after years, over a decade, quote, on what would be the eve of the 13-year anniversary of Shauna's disappearance, the O'Brien brothers learned their fate. In the end, the jury found the brothers guilty of second-degree murder, guilty of third-degree murder, guilty of involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, and guilty of kidnapping and criminal conspiracy to commit kidnapping. The brothers' convictions for second-degree murder, otherwise known as a felony murder, carries a mandatory lifetime sentence without the possibility of parole. Second-degree murder is not considered premeditated. Instead, the law categorizes it as a murder which occurs during the commission of a felony crime, such as kidnapping. As for the more serious charges of the first-degree murder and rape, the O'Briens were acquitted of those charges. Acquitted. According to the law, in order for a jury to find a defendant guilty of first-degree murder, the jury must be convinced that the killing was premeditated and deliberate, which the jury deemed that the prosecution had not proven. The verdicts brought the long-awaited 13-year murder case to its conclusion. End quote. So, like it said, the two brothers were sentenced to life behind bars. Walker, on the other hand, although he wasn't entirely helpful, he did initially confess, which managed to help him get a plea deal. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 2025. Right around the corner. That is crazy to think about. Let's keep that bastard in prison, please. For years, the abduction and murder of Shauna Howe would haunt Oil City and their residents. And up until 2008, trick-or-treating itself on Halloween was restricted purely to daytime hours. As for the Howe family themselves, I will leave you with a quote from Shauna's mother, Lucy, who has since moved out of Oil City, Pennsylvania. Oil City, excuse me. Quote, there are kids out there running around after dark. I want people to remember Shauna and what happened to her. In 1992, I believed that Oil City was a safe place. I don't believe that now. I don't believe there is any place that is safe to raise kids. End quote. Honestly, same girl. It is a big bad world out there full of scary berry monsters, and they're everywhere. Damn. Sorry to end on such a downer. Normally, I try to have like a happy quote or something a survivor is doing now, but nope, not today. Nowhere is safe. Hide your kids. No, I'm not going to do that. Okie dokie. That is all, folks. Again, very sorry for the sick boy voice. I think I did okay pushing through. If not, again, my apologies. Maybe it made me sound a little bit more like Chris Hemsworth. Who knows? Have a wonderful day. Bye bye. Love you.